Let's begin.
Wait, I don't remember seeing this in here. What else happened back? Oh, hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Well, maybe these old tales will have some new meaning in the weeks to come. I mean, learn from the hellish past, or be doomed to repetition. Settle yourselves in for an insightful entry that Doughboy420 likes to call Locust Lake, the Journal, Entry 2, The Bloody Wedding.
Eddie woke up to the sound of the alarm on his phone. He was a bit groggy from the bachelor party the night before. Drank quite a bit and his head reminded him of it, but now he had just a few short hours to get ready for one of the most important days of his life, the day he was to get married to his high school sweetheart, Samantha. The two of them were madly in love, and they planned to get hit go years before. And one day, they just kind of happened across each other down by the lake shore, and the rest was history. Eddie was nervous as hell. Today was the big day that he was going to tie the knot, so he wanted to make sure that he looked his best. He showered and shaved and donned his white suit with a sky blue pocket square in his breast pocket. Meanwhile, his bride-to-be, Samantha, was already at the campground. She was in one of the nicer cabins, getting ready herself. She had already gotten up earlier that day to make sure everything was right before she too donned the special garb that she would wear for the occasion. A beautiful, long and flowing dress of silk and lace. She wasn't sure about herself, but her bridesmaids, Kelly and Cindy, and her maid of honor, Dawn, assured her that she looked quite marvelous and that Eddie would fall in love with her all over again. This was further reinforced when her little sister, Tanya, walked into the room and gasped in excitement, commenting that she looked like a princess from a book that she'd been reading. Tanya managed to encourage her sister, but it also reinforced why Samantha hadn't chose her to be the flower girl. Eddie was a bucket of nerves. He had made it to the campground and sat, waiting for his closest friends who would act as his groomsmen. Lucas was Eddie's best man. They had been friends for as long as they were alive, since their parents were also friends. He was a bit of a party animal and a smartass too, but he was really a good dude. Reggie was the big African-American dude with the shaved bald head. He was intimidating to most because of his size and strength, but under all of that, he was a big teddy bear that just liked to have a fun time. Then there was Seth Orland Smith, or SOS for short, and his son, Leon, his final groomsman and ring bearer, respectively. Seth was a bit of a dick, and Eddie wasn't really sure why he was friends with him in the first place. He wasn't very nice, not even to his own family really, but he was good to have around because he would still help you any time that you needed it, and Eddie appreciated that and didn't really have many other friends in the area otherwise, so he gave him the opportunity to be one of his groomsmen. Leon, on the other hand, he seemed to be a good kid, and Samantha liked having him around. That was the only way she could tolerate Seth, was if he brought his son over so that he could play with her little sister, who was always over the apartment visiting. Leon had a bright and aspiring future ahead of him. Despite his father's lack of ambition, the two of them were both nervous. Samantha was checking and rechecking everything and double and triple checking her makeup and dress. while Eddie was pacing back and forth in need of a drink. "Hey man, you look like you could use a puff. Want to go have a smoke?" Lucas asked.
Nah, I can't, man. I gotta stay sober or Sam will kill me.
"Alright, man. I'm gonna go burn one, though. Anyone else want in?" Lucas asked. "Nah, man, I'm good," said Reggie. "I'd never turn down a toke," Seth said. "Damn. Hey, Reggie, would you mind watching Leon for a minute?" he then asked. "Sure, SOS. No problem," Reggie said, agreeing to watch Seth's son while he went off to get high. Little Leon was playing with some toys that he had brought along in the next room over. They put him in the play area to make sure that he didn't mess up his new outfit. Lucas and Seth exited the cabin and made their way up the hill a little ways, away from the people attending the wedding, where Lucas pulled out a bag of dank weed and his glass pipe to pack it up. Unfortunately, before the two of them could even start smoking, the sound of a twig being snapped startled Lucas, causing him to drop the pipe, where it cracked into several pieces on the ground. "God damn it," Lucas said aloud with a sigh of disgust before reaching down to pick up the pieces of the broken pipe. But when he bent over to retrieve his broken marijuana pipe, he happened to look to his right, where he saw the dirty boots of a large man, a man wearing a stitchwork mask. The man then snatched one of the broken pieces of the pipe from the ground and stuck it violently into Lucas's neck, where his blood filled the broken chamber before squirting out of the bowl in the opposite end like a sanguine fountain. "What the fuck?" Seth yelled in shock at what the massive man had done, before the beast then grabbed him about his arms and forced his body between a Y in the base of a tree where two branches separated. He then positioned the screaming and protesting man between the limbs of the tree like it was nothing, before wrenching his body backward, forcing it to snap unnaturally until his spine finally split in half, nearly breaking the man in two, only his flesh holding him together. Back down at the camp, everyone was settling down in their seats, near to the apple orchard beside the lake, all of them marveling at how beautiful everything looked. The apple trees in full blossom, their small canopy hanging over the latticework archway, near to where Samantha and Eddie would be wed. Inside separate cabins, both those parties were still a bucket of nerves. Samantha was finally just finishing up everything while Eddie was freaking out because his best man and one of his groomsmen were now nowhere to be seen, and they had just a few minutes to go before everything was about to go down.
"Oh man, where are they?"
Eddie asked himself, pacing back and forth, looking out a window on either side of his stride. "Relax, man. They'll be here," Reggie reassured his friend. A couple more minutes then passed, with Reggie becoming more unsure of himself, and Eddie losing his mind.
"I don't think they're gonna make it. Those assholes went off and smoked themselves stupid. So, Reggie, you have hereby been promoted to best man. We need to get out there,"
Eddie said, while patting his friend on the shoulder before rushing out the door. Reggie poked his head into the next room and told little Leon that the wedding was about to start, bringing a grin and an "oh boy" from the young boy before he bolted excitedly out the door. The two of them then took their positions at the head of everyone in attendance, standing beside the Catholic priest, Father Kenneth, who was there to officiate the ceremony. This left the bridesmaids, Cindy and Kelly, to enter alone, the ushers meant to accompany them, now either dead or promoted to best man. This was followed by Dawn, the maid of honor, who was followed by two young children walking together. Leon wore his little suit and carried a small blue pillow that matched the pocket squares worn by the groom and groomsmen, while Tanya walked beside him, appearing to tower over him, although they were relatively the same age. She wore a sky blue dress that matched the chosen attire. Then finally a radio began playing the bridal chorus to usher in the bride. Samantha took her father's arm and walked with him out of the nearby cabin. Everyone around gasped and commented on how amazing and happy she looked. The father and the bride slowly passed by everyone as the music played until Samantha was standing before the man that she loved. Her father hugged her and gave her a kiss before turning to shake the hand of his soon-to-be son. He then moved to his seat beside Samantha's brother Stephen at the front of the crowd. Father Kenneth began the ceremony, welcoming everyone to the occasion and asking for their vows, to which each of them recited what they had written. Samantha talked about the day they had met and their first date, and how she felt through every date after, vowing to continue the fun times, while Eddie reminisced on late-night conversations and moonlit walks and vowed to continue to bring her happiness from that day forth. They said their I do's, the rings were placed on their fingers, and the priest pronounced them man and wife, then allowed Eddie to kiss his bride. The two of them passionately kissed, and everyone cheered and applauded, congratulating them as they finished the kiss and began walking by their guests, who each stood up for them as they passed. The two of them made it to the back of the crowd, near to where there stood a large podium, upon which there sat a beautifully adorned guest book, signed with a quill pen by every guest. The two of them smiled at each other in their last happy moment, before the quill pen was lodged deep into Samantha's neck by a large fist. Eddie's eyes widened with shock as he watched his wife collapse onto the ground, blood spurting from the wound in her neck. The man screamed in rage and sorrow, lunging forward to attack the man that had murdered his love. He punched at the tall figure's chest and face, but it did little to faze the monster before him. The monstrous man wore an old, ragged, and ripped t-shirt like a mask that covered his face very poorly, exposing the burned skin beneath, melted in places, down to the bone. He wore all black, including a long, dirty trench coat. Eddie screamed and punched at the monster, now causing the rest of the crowd to react to everything that had happened, screaming, running, crying. The monster simply grabbed Eddie from around the neck and squeezed. Eddie went from fighting in anger to fighting for his life, kicking and gasping for air. He began to turn red, but before he could be choked to death, his head snapped to the side as his neck was crushed between the man's large fingers. This was followed by Eddie's body being tossed on top of his still bleeding wife, both of their eyes staring into the other's together, even in death. Samantha's brother Stephen was the first to act. Immediately, he grabbed a nearby steel chair that someone had been sitting in moments before and slammed it full force into the man's back like he was a professional wrestler. He repeatedly hit him with several loud clunks, causing the monster to fall to a knee before turning to grab the metal chair mid-swing. The monster, Jacob Treagle, then ripped the chair clear from Stephen's hands before thrusting it back at him with such force that one of the chair legs penetrated his stomach, followed by it being once again withdrawn, only for Jacob to turn the chair around to use it as a club against Stephen's head, swinging it with several loud clangs, causing dents to the steel before his head was finally crushed. It was at that moment that a second beast emerged from the forest. Casper Stoical, the butcher in the stitchwork mask, moved out of the trees near to where the bridesmaids still stood, frozen in fear, staring at the horrors unfolding before their eyes, so enthralled by the absolute fear that they didn't even notice the butcher of Locust Lake stalking up behind them. Dawn, the maid of honor, was the first to go. Casper grabbed a hold of the poor woman, whom immediately screamed, causing the other two women to snap out of their trance and flee without even attempting to help her. The beast placed his fingers inside the woman's screaming mouth, causing her to gag in disgust, before he then yanked downward, ripping the bottom jaw completely off of her face. The woman's tongue flailed around out of the bleeding mouth with a missing bottom jaw as her eyes rolled back in her head and her body fell to the ground. Reggie attempted to come to the woman's aid, but it was too late. He witnessed Dawn getting her face ripped apart. The large man wasn't intimidated by the equally as large Casper Stoical, and he let Casper know it with a solid punch to the face, followed by another, which was then followed by Casper reaching up with both hands and gripping onto either side of the man's head like a vice. Reggie screamed and attempted to fight back, punching at Casper's face and then at his arms, but it did nothing. Instead, Reggie's eyeballs popped out of his slowly crushing skull, followed by blood leaking out of his nostrils and mouth as his head collapsed in upon itself. Father Kenneth was a man of God, even in his dying moment. The man stood there, praying as an enraged Casper grabbed the small podium where he stood and pummeled the poor man with it, before leaving it laying upon his bloodied corpse. People ran in every direction, scattering into cabins, into the forest, and into vehicles to quickly exit the premises. But not many of them got away. It was a massacre, as each guest was slaughtered. Cindy attempted to flee by climbing into an old wooden rowboat in order to escape across the lake, but before the woman could even get beyond the waist-deep water, Casper was there to stop her. The woman frantically attempted to beat the beast away with an oar, but Casper advanced unhindered. The butcher of Locust Lake ripped the oar from the woman's hand and returned the attack, wailing the woman across the side of her head with the end of the oar, causing her to drop into the water, where Casper delivered several more whacks from the wooden oar, cracking it over the woman's body. She screamed in agony, and her lungs filled with the murky waters of the lake, ending her life. Shane, Samantha's father, was devastated, but nonetheless, he attempted to lead some people to safety by grabbing the reins of a horse-drawn carriage and ushering some people into it, but his compassion would be his downfall. Jacob Treagle quickly approached, and before the old man knew it, the monster's hand was about his throat. The people screamed and scattered at the sight of the demon before them. It was then that Jacob gripped the horse's reins and pulled the rope down to wrap it tightly around the man's neck before letting the terrified horses loose, at which point the horses took off running, now free from the post to which they were tied. The father of the bride was dragged behind the galloping animals, his body bouncing off the dirt road and twisting violently with each kick from the horses beside him, as parts of his body occasionally slipped between the horses' hooves before the carriage disappeared beyond sight. Kelly was the only surviving member of the main wedding party, and she had locked herself inside a large cabin that was being used as a cafeteria. There were white, lacy tablecloths all set up on the tables, and there was food prepared and candles upon elaborate candlesticks that were all set up for everyone to have a wedding reception that would never come. The woman figured that she would hide there until help arrived, and it was then that she heard whimpering coming from somewhere in the room. Kelly followed the sound to one of the tables at the back of the room, and when she peeked beneath it, she discovered little Tanya and Leon huddled together in fear.
Hey guys, it's okay. I'm gonna get you out of here, okay?
She said before standing up, holding the tablecloth to the side so the two of them could exit from their hiding place. But before any of them could react, a candlestick slammed roughly against the back of the woman's head, causing her to collapse onto the floor in front of the hiding children. This was preceded by the candle being turned over and driven downward into the woman's face. The candle mostly broke away, aside from a bit at the bottom, which was held in place by a large spike at the top of the ornate candlestick. The spike drove deep into the woman's cranium with a kind of cracking noise. The children screamed in terror and ran out the opposite end of the table, causing the monster that had just murdered the woman to become enraged. Jacob Treagle overturned the tables and threw aside chairs in his advancement towards his prey. The children were swift enough to escape the horror behind them, but they soon had another threat to deal with. Casper Stoical approached them from the front. The children ran past dead bodies and scenes of extreme gore, but they had to escape. Somehow, they were lucky enough to also slip past the butcher before them. They ran as fast as they could, tears still streaming down their faces, their eyes burning from being dry, and cried out. They escaped the camp and made it to the road, where they were able to flag down a car to take them into town. The people in town pretended like they didn't believe them, like nothing happened. Their silence had already begun. The townsfolk didn't want anyone to know about the curse that lived nearby, so they did what they always do. They covered it up, told the children that they imagined it, that they dreamt up the monsters, that the murders had been committed by a psychotic, newlywed couple. Tanya's sister and her new husband had committed these heinous acts, and that was it. The town lied and made it all go away. A lie that Leon eventually grew to believe. A lie that would come to get him elected mayor of a little town near Locust Lake. The boy who escaped death.
Well, I mean, 1 marriage and 27 funerals, isn't that like 28 of the same thing? But if you're a glutton for punishment yourself, stop by again for more next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.